Hi everyone, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh, and a very good day to everyone. I'm going to share with all of you lesson 6 on international management and cultural insights. So for your kind information, this chapter is very much important that it relates to your final exam. I will also touch more on this preparation for final exam towards the end of the semester. So, what is more important for this chapter that you need to know is how national culture or culture affect the way we do things in a particular country or in any organization. So, what is culture? Culture refers to acquired knowledge that people use to interpret experience and generate social behavior. So if you look around you and see different sets of behavior that has been displayed or that are displayed and demonstrated by people around you, that may due to the influence of culture that has been inculcated to them or embedded in them since young. And it is also very important for us to understand the differences in the way people behave because it reflects the way they do things in their daily life and also in an organization. Some types of culture are well accepted and well received in a country, but may not be well received in another country. So that's why intercultural competencies, understanding diversity, differences in culture is very important for those who are interested in venturing beyond their local shores, or if they are interested in performing in global arena or working in an organization in different country. And culture also provides us with knowledge in regards to the values, the attitudes, and why people behave in the way they do in a particular setting. Now, there are different types of cultural diversity that you may explore or has been explained in the textbook and also publication related to culture. But these are among the common ones that you can actually observe being displayed by people from various parts of the world in an organization. Some culture appreciate centralization, while others appreciate decentralization. In that manner, in certain societies, they allow or they only leave the decision-making task or decision-making responsibility to those at the top management. It is not that it reflects what we call imposing or patronizing kind of culture, but that's how they do things. Basically, they are very much respective of the top management. So whatever decisions, they will wait for the top management to decide and being cascade down to the middle management and also to the operational level. Other culture appreciates decentralization and empowerment. And some organizations, if you see the more flat organization, the flatter type organization, normally practice decentralization of decision making. Hence, they allow their middle managers and the lower management to make key decisions. And most of the time, these type of practices or this type of managerial approaches are influenced by culture or national culture. Now, there are also types of cultural diversity when it comes to safety and risk. In this manner, sometimes we call it risk taker or risk averse, or sometimes we call it tolerance for ambiguity or risk-taking behavior. Now, if you ponder upon certain regions or certain national cultures, you will notice that some people are very much risk-taker. They are encouraged by risk-taking behavior, and they are more prone towards making decisions in very uncertain environment. right? But there are also circumstances where culture or society behave in a more risk-averse manner, and they try to avoid conflict or difficult situations, and they would rather remain in a comfort zone. Now, this kind of behavior can be observed in individuals, but most of the time, as referred to by Hofstede, they are influenced by the national culture and how people in the society behave. So, safety means risk averse, not ready to take risks, or very much avoidance of risk. But those who are risk takers are the ones who would rather embrace risky type of decision making or embrace uncertainty. There are also individual and group set of behavior. Now, individualism in some culture would rather award or reward or recognize individual performance in the form of monetary or non-monetary reward. So they would rather recognize individual performance as compared to group or team performance. So the differences in that manner would also influence the way people behave in an organization. So if individualism or individual performance or reward are very much appreciated in that kind of organization, then you will see the behavior of the workforce or employees are more towards becoming individualistic or working more in silo, whereas those who appreciate or reward group work or teamwork, you see more behavior reflecting teamwork and group work. And there are also discussion on informality and formality. Some society would prefer to leverage on informal type of procedure, and they make sure that they accomplish goal and they accomplish tasks in a more informal manner and informal way, whereas there are also society or national culture that is a bit more stringent and also rigid in that manner. So they would rather have a formal procedure, formal process policy, and formal regulation to guide behavior in a particular organization. And also, we can see high or low organizational loyalty, not just that discussion on loyalty encompasses generation differences or generational differences. There are also societies that appreciate high level of loyalty to the society or to the organization or employer, whereas there are also circumstances where you can see people are not so much embracing loyalty, and hence they are more flexible in the way they do things, and you see high mobility in their occupations or in their organization. And also there's society that embrace our culture that prefers stability and very much resistant to change, and this is also reflective in the form of a safety culture, whereas there are also culture that appreciate taking risks, experimentation, try and error. Hence, they value more innovation and also they appreciate change more than those culture that prefer stability. Now, reflecting on culture, based on what we have discussed earlier on, there's a culture guru or a researcher that looks into culture in detail. And this is a study conducted by Gerd Hofstede, one of the professor, well-known professor who looks into culture in the form of 6 dimensions. As you can see, we have power distance, uncertainty avoidance, individualism, collectivism, masculinity, femininity, time orientation, indulgence versus restraint. What are these dimensions? If you can see from this figure or from this diagram, you see the spectrum of each one of the sixth dimension. So if we are referring to power distance index, you are talking about those high power distance where you can see the authority remains at the top management and the decision making are more centralized. Whereas culture that appreciate low power distance where there's not so much gap between the top management and the lower management, you'll see more power sharing in that type of organization. And we also have individualism versus collectivism. This can also reflect the individual reward versus group reward that we have seen just now. So for individualism culture, the appreciation is more towards individual interest, whereas in collectivism culture, the appreciation is given to collective interest or group interest or the team in that manner. Whereas masculinity versus femininity talks about patriarchy and also gender equality. In a society where you can see high masculinity, you see the power concentration is more towards the male orientation, whereas the culture that focuses on femininity or low in masculinity will appreciate more gender equality and opportunity being given equal across what do you call that gender, be it masculine or feminine. Whereas uncertainty avoidance talks about the level of risk taking and also risk avoidance. So in a culture where there's high uncertainty avoidance, you will see less innovation taking place. Whereas in a culture where people are more tolerant towards ambiguity or uncertainty, and are more risk takers, you will see greater innovation initiative happening. And when you talk about long-term and short-term orientation, those with high long-term orientation would appreciate more flexibility in the way they do things, right? And those who have low long-term orientation would prefer to have universal guidelines and would prefer to have more comprehensive guidelines to guide their behavior. And finally, when we talk about indulgence, it will basically reflecting the level of optimism and level of pessimism in the culture. And these are the definitions and more examples of Hofstede culture dimensions, which involve power distance, high and low, uncertainty avoidance, high versus low, individualism versus collectivism. All right, you can also see some examples of the country that appreciate high individualism, whereas there are also countries that prefer to have high collectivism. And here are the explanation on also masculinity and femininity. Bear in mind, when you talk about masculinity and femininity, it's not reflecting gender as in at face value, yeah. It is more reflecting of the behavior, dominant social values in a country where masculinity values are more dominated with aggressiveness, success orientation, need for achievement, and whatnot. Whereas those culture that value femininity normally focuses on cooperation, friendly atmosphere, group decision making, and also less stress and more security. And finally, we talk about also time orientation. As I mentioned just now, when you talk about long-term orientation, you are focusing on the future. You are becoming a bit more flexible. You tend to invest and also try to achieve long-term results. Whereas short-term type of orientation focuses on quick result and believe or value stability and also appreciate pleasure in that manner. And indulgence versus restraint talk about optimism and feminism, optimism and also pessimism. And optimism or indulgent culture talks about instant gratification or appreciation to happiness and whatnot, whereas restrained culture are a bit more contained in the way they express their behavior or in the way they express their positive emotions. They are a bit more restrained in that manner. And finally, this is the important figure or table that I wish to share with you, the results of the national cultural dimension based on 6 cultural dimension. PDI refers to power distance index. IVC refers to individualism and versus collectivism. MAS refers to masculinity versus femininity. UAI refers to uncertainty avoidance index. LTO refers to long-term orientation, whereas IND refers to indulgence. What is more important in the form of this kind of index is that there's a special website or a dedicated database that shows the cultural factor or the outcome of study conducted by Hofstede, and these Hofstede insights provide you with the details of the score on each 6 dimension of culture, which is power distance, okay, which are including power distance, individualism, and then also uncertainty avoidance, long-term orientation, and indulgence. And from this website, you can also identify the scores of at least 20 countries. Now, when you talk about international management, normally managers or top management of a particular organization would use this kind of score to understand the way people behave in different country. Why is it important? Because if they have intention to go abroad or to venture into strategic alliances or to set up a branch in a different country, they might want to see the cultural context of a particular country because it has implication in terms of the way people do things in organization, right? So what I want you to do now is to look at this website. You can go to www.hofstedinsights.com and you look at country comparison tool. I want you to look at United States, Germany, and France and see the demarcation in terms of the 6 cultural dimensions and try to provide insights into how these three countries would differ in terms of their managerial approaches, right? So I leave it up to that point, and I've also included a video, a very clear description of each and every cultural dimension and how they affect the way people behave in an organization. And the video also explains some limitation in terms of Hofstede study of national culture. So please have a look and try to do this activity and see what outcome that you might encounter in terms of the managerial approaches of the 3 different countries in regards to the 6 cultural dimension as reflected in the figure next to the instruction. All right, so thank you very much. I'll leave it up to that point for your exercise. Thank you.